Do you think that horns are cool? Do you think that horns are sexy? No, I'm getting ahead of myself. The very idea of placing horns on our human head is not new. It came to many of our ancestors, and by now we are so used to it, thanks to fantasy, that it has almost lost its original meaning and symbolism. Like the red-horned devil. We've seen them so many times in movies and games, especially in Baldur's Gate 3. Seriously, why is there so many horned people in Baldur's Gate 3? Like the Tieflings, aren't they supposed to be an anomaly? A rarity? No, I know the story explanation for these ones. This group, they are refugees from a big city in a demonic crisis. But really, it's so many of them. How big a city should be to have this much occasional people with devilish ancestry? And you keep meeting new ones throughout the game.
So, we're all Tieflings now. Great. So now none of us is special.
And at which point, I'm asking you, being a Tiefling loses its special charm?
Hi, I am Not-a-witchr, more like one of his contracts. And I've always been a Tiefling lover, a lover of Tieflings, an admirer of this particular race in RPGs. But playing Baldur's Gate 3 made me think, what makes this race so attractive to players? Except their obvious hotness.
Keeps me burning hot.
Very hot by the smell of it.
Remember that Critical Role had 2 Tieflings in one player party in their second campaign. And why Tieflings from Baldur's Gate 3 feel a bit different from any previous games.
To answer that question, we may need to look into the real-world history and culture. But not very deep and just briefly, because Tieflings were invented in the 90s, and everything before that is just an inspiration. So, ancient Greeks had daemons, or daimons, which were spirits or lesser deities, which could be malevolent and benevolent. They also had satyrs, who had goat legs and horns. Some researchers think this is exactly why the classic demons look like they do now. Christianity, of course, adopted only the bad meaning of the word daemon, eventually giving us demons in different forms, and in time we had this easily recognized image of a demon with horns and hoofs and a tail, sometimes with wings like a bat. In the 1980s, when Dungeons and Dragons started worrying American parents, I bet it were the demons that drove the final nail in the coffin of the public image of this game. And it didn't matter that in the game players actually fought and slayed demons and not summoned or worshipped them. Except for the dungeon masters, who had always been evil. Now we are actually coming to the Tieflings. In the 90s, D&D players wanted something else besides the traditional fantasy races. They wanted to explore darker and edgier characters with tragic past or terrible secrets. And they were given these options. Tieflings were introduced in 1994 in the Planescape campaign setting. The name was derived by Wolfgang Bauer from the German word tief, meaning deep, low, and the suffix ling, like offspring, alluding to their origins in the lower planes or hells. Originally, Tieflings are indirect descendants of fiends or demons. Meaning that if your ancestor had a fling or a deal with a demon, after several generations you could be born in a perfectly normal family but with a tail and horns. Fiends don't need immediate offspring. They can wait. Now, you may be as surprised as I was to learn that there are people in this world, like Philip J. Clements, a PhD, who wrote a dissertation named Dungeons and Discourse: Intersectional Identities in Dungeons and Dragons. Seriously, that guy is my new hero. And this is what he wrote about Tieflings. They are often treated as dangerous outsiders, yet D&D's default assumption is that the players will portray heroes. The idea of playing the racial outsider who nonetheless protects the people who wrongly revile them is a well-known trope built into D&D. Yes, that's right, Tieflings were created as outsiders or even outcasts. And this is where I tread on a thin ice as I talk about
Tieflings only, I'm afraid.
You can't say that.
Yes, I can.
I'm racist.
Some aspects of fantasy is often misunderstood and taken by modern people as offensive, like the bad treatment of people who look different, which should be explained by the lack of education and tolerance among certain groups living in a fantasy world. For example, a medieval human peasant who has never in his life seen any other people different from his very human neighbors, upon meeting, let's say, a drow elf for the first time, will react to them in a manner that we today find unacceptable and racist. The peasant would be afraid of an outsider, or maybe fascinated by them like a curiosity. But this is what I would argue makes it more real and authentic than if this peasant would be polite and did not react at all to the fact that this newcomer looks like nothing they have ever seen in their life, and more like some terrible creature from an old tale. Actually, we should not talk about racism here, but about xenophobia, which is not the same. You see, if fantasy is in any way similar to the ancient or medieval times from which it almost always draws its inspiration, then the peoples living in a fantasy world are nations so different and separated geographically and culturally that they simply haven't developed understanding and tolerance to each other yet. To their eyes, any outsiders are not to be trusted because they are unknown and unpredictable. This is not racism. It's xenophobia, which is a bad thing, but a totally different thing from what we have today in a society where anyone should know better. Back to Tieflings. They are not like any other fantasy race, except maybe Aasimars, because they are the abnormal representatives of humans. Yeah, some whites always humans, like dwarves and elves do not interest Finns so much to mix with their ancestors. Tieflings are not a race because they are not a nation, not a one culture. This is what differs them from drow, who also often were discriminated for being the dark elves.
The drow, a race of murderers and thieves.
Well, you won't see me playing hero.
Tieflings were supposed to always be loners, outsiders to their own race. That is just a part of their appeal. I'm not like the others. Everybody treat me unfairly. Many of us in the real world could relate to that. So what did Larian Studios do? They gathered a bunch of Tieflings together, forcing them to make a community, which is a beautiful thing. They even have their own Tiefling children. Okay, maybe the lower planes blood is really strong in their lineage. This or Arabella is adopted. This part of Baldur's Gate 3 resonates very much with today's social problems, like the refugee crisis. But it kinda takes away the very thing that made Tieflings special for several generations of RPG players. Okay, so with that sorted out, the main question remains: why do we like Tieflings and demons/devils in our games? Is it because we are all secretly evil? Maybe we subconsciously associate horns with animals, primal instincts, being wild and unrestricted by social norms, and sex. Do we associate horns with sex? I think there are two main reasons. First, religion telling us that devil has horns and devil is bad, and we all somehow think that sometimes being bad is cool. And the second, maybe even the main reason, the mythical creature known as succubus. A demon in a woman's form whose only goal is to take your life force by having sex with you. I mean, screw vampires, those guys just bite you. If I could choose a creature that would be the end of me, I have my winner. So, do we like Tieflings exactly because they have features of demons/devils? Do we secretly hope that a tiefling girl has the ancestry of a succubus? What do you think?
I hope we will see the hot demon people in future games. That's actually all I have to say. As always, thank you for watching, take care, and farewell.